about that. So we are going to do a few things today. I didn't bring the PowerPoint presentation because I finally gave up on it. So a few things that we need to talk about, some housekeeping items. One, NUCs for next year's sale. Leadership has met and we have signed a contract once again with COX Bees. So we will be doing NUCs with them. Everybody's gone up in prices, so we had to go up a tad. They're going to be, instead of 200, they're going to be 225 for the group sale. But you can't touch that 235, and the size limit after that for NUCs. The gentleman that came and spoke to us at the last meeting, Jim Austin, he is getting some singles, you know, people that are doing that. If we get a few more people together, he will deliver them and give you a discount. So if you're thinking of buying from him, that's what he has to offer, okay? We will be doing on field day next year the queen sale, and we're gonna use the Cox queens again. So you'll start to see emails and Facebook pages about the information on how to order from the Club NUCs if you want to, but that is our buyer, official buyer for this year. Okay, so we're pretty happy with that. We were happy last year. So that's that. The second thing is in the back, okay, dear Mr. Peter Cowger is deciding to step out of beekeeping. Our loss, but your gain, okay? He's selling things cutthroat. So we have things back there that you can look at. On the boxes, there's a red, orange, deep box down there. I have a lot of those at my house. We did not have the truck. So I have a lot of those with frames. So if you're interested in those, look at the prices there. And I come up to Kerrville if you're around this area, or if you're in the Pipe Creek area, you can come to me, whichever is more convenient. We can mix and match and get those. And I still have a few other things that I just couldn't fit in. So at the end, you can give the money to either Peter, right, Richard, Georgina, or myself after the meeting, okay? You can do that, and we'll be back there taking the money for that. We also had some stuff that he has donated to our club for the bee yard, so we thank him for that. And by the way, Peter, stand up. He has actually been the person that has helped make us have the pollinator analysis kit at the field days, okay? And we now, thanks to him, we also have an EpiPen for the bee yard. Okay, we are going to do club elections because this little queen bee is tired. After 7 years, right, lost track. And I am definitely leaving with my college roommate, Debbie. We are driving up to Boston on December 17th, so I'm going to be spending time with my dad for an undetermined amount of time. I will be back for field day and running that with some other people. And then when I come back Texas full-time, I'm going to be sitting in that chair and being a good bee worker. But I cannot thank this club so much for how cool you guys have been, how loving, and you know, we listen to I listen to the other leaders and stuff like that. We are definitely a unique club. We've got it together, and we've got a great leadership team. I think we've come far, and we have a lot more to go. They know my telephone number. So we are doing club elections now, and as far as I know, nobody has come up to me and said that they wanted to run. So is there anybody in this room that wants to run for a position that I didn't know about? Okay, so say that statement you said to me.
Well, if the officer's been presented, I move that we make a motion, we accept the officers by acclamation. If I need to hear a second, though.
I'll second.
Okay, Richard.
We got a second? So we move back, Richard, right? We have a motion on the floor to accept all officers as presented by acclamation. We have a second, so we can vote on it. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. And the ayes have it, and we now have our 2026 officers.
Okay, so Richard, come on up here. Richard is your new president. Woo-hoo! Poor guy. Now, we ran out of time today, and we really couldn't pass the chair on to Richard. We were supposed to
Make believe it's a
and we were supposed to go to Burger King, and she reminded me, but we were running late. So we will find a crown for you. Ethan, come on up. Ethan is gonna remain our vice president and pretty boy and all that good kind of stuff. Guy who likes to talk a lot. Richard? Ethan? Georgina couldn't get away if she wanted to because she does such a good job with the money that I said, you can't go. So Georgina's gonna remain our treasurer and keep us on track of everything. And stepping up from an advisory position, Tara Randle, come on up, and she is going to be our new club secretary and does everything. On advisory committee, Ryan, come on up. Ryan Halley is an advisory committee person that we, you know, when we think that we know it all, we ask somebody from the club to say, what do you guys really think? So this is what advisory people do. Pat Mossman, come on up. Okay. Allison Luther is not here. She is, you don't see her that much, she can't make it to the meetings, but she's our marketing and as far as sign up genius, and she helps field day and everything like that, so she's an advisory person also. So this is our team that is taking you into the 2020-26 year. Okay. Oh, wait a minute, Brandy, come on up here. Brandy, Brandy keeps our BR organized, so when we need our equipment and stuff like that, we can go to it and it's there and super organized, and we mess it up and then she has to come clean it up. So Brandy, certainly. And Sue Thomas is not here, and she also helps out too. Okay, thank you. And I am going to sleep so well tonight. Actually, I have a lot of things that I have to go over. Okay, so January we'll start the meetings again, like we always do on the regular date. Okay, so we don't meet in December. There will be no luncheon, dinner type thing that we do on the off months because of the holidays. So the next meeting will be in January. Okay. What other important things? Anything else really important?
To Linda.
Oh. You guys made it easy. Okay, so our special guest speaker tonight, come on, Mr. Garrett, come on down. Those who've been with us a while know that we have an organization in Texas called Texas A&M. I'm gonna let you explain exactly what you do.
Sure.
And everything, and this is our new guy on the block, and I like it that he's young. I like it that he has enthusiasm. He's been working with the Master Beekeeper program. He's actually got on field day, gonna have some colonies there, and they're gonna do something.
We'll be there, yep.
Yep, they're gonna be there. And we're gonna start tapping into, well, the new leadership team is probably gonna be tapping into him a little bit more. And so he's gonna talk to you tonight about honeybee breeding. Okay?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you for having me. This is my first time in Kerrville. I have to say this is probably the most beautiful part of Texas, going through hill country. I really enjoyed it. Is there any meaderies around here? There must be with all the
Talk to
vineyards.
Ethan.
So we're, so under the cover there's some meaderies. Well, you know, so Linda asked me to give a talk on varroa, and that ties into some of our research on honeybee breeding and genetics. But I do want to talk about the program a little bit. So my name is Garrett Slater. I'm the Texas A&M honeybee specialist. And so I'm located in Overton, Texas. And so if you know where Tyler, Texas is, it's about an hour and a half, east of Dallas. That's where our facility is. But my appointment is 100% extension. I have a statewide appointment. So that means I spend a lot of time traveling across the entire state. So I've been to El Paso, Amarillo, really kind of speaking about our program and things that we're developing. We have regional specialists in Dallas, San Antonio, and Houston. I'm not sure, has Molly Keck been here before, a few times?
Molly, no.
She hasn't been here, okay. So she's our specialist in San Antonio. Omar Martinez is in Dallas, and we're currently hiring somebody in Houston. And so this is sort of our entire team. We're also hiring somebody to run our honeybee diagnostic lab. We also have a honeybee breeder in Overton. So our team is about 5 people so far. And I'm really excited. So I started this position about a year and a half ago. It's a brand new program. We've never had a honeybee extension program ever, which is amazing considering Florida has one, California has one. And so we're really starting to grow this program from scratch. And so I'd love to hear from you guys about things we can develop and things we can do to help beekeepers in this area. So, I'm all open ears. If there's programs he wants to develop, maybe an online program on the Lucifer bee, I don't know where he is, but yeah, on the Lucifer bee or native pollinators, we're happy to develop some of those programs. So one program we're running is a pollen mapping project. Are there any beekeepers in the room that's participating in this project? Nobody is? So our goal is to make a pollen map across the state of Texas. So starting in June, we send pollen traps to around 50 beekeepers across 50 counties, and they're collecting pollen for us once a month. And really our goal is to understand what bees are bringing in, what type of pollen bees are foraging on, and we're also looking at the nutritional quality of that pollen. So is it lower in protein content, higher protein content, and I'll give some more information about what bees are actually bringing in. So if you're in a county, I'm not sure if you have anybody in Kerr County or any neighboring counties,
Yes.
just get to know your county agent, reach out to them and say, hey, I want to participate in this study, and we will send you the pollen trap. It's pretty simple. You put the pollen trap on, close it once a month, we'll send you a reminder email, and then you send the pollen samples back to us for an analysis. So it seems like your club's already doing that, but it'd be cool to get more and more beekeepers involved with this. Another program we have is the Texas Master Beekeeping Program. Anybody that's currently in the program? Okay, apprentice, advanced? Apprentice? Oh, apprentice? Advanced? Okay, awesome. So we've had this program for about 10 years or so. It was started by the Texas Beekeeper Association and the Texas Apiary Inspection Service. Now it's run under Texas A&M Extension, which kind of falls under our program. So we're making a lot of changes to the program. We're trying to improve it a lot more. And one of our major initiatives is really include the clubs a bit more with the program. Because we can offer a lot of online virtual courses, a lot of classes, but we really need the clubs being more involved to get the hands-on experience. Because it's one thing to learn online, but it's really important to get that hands-on experience. So for those that aren't familiar with the program, there's 4 different levels to the program. We have apprentice, advanced, master, and master craftsman. For the apprentice level, the only requirement is our 10-week course. We have a 10-week course starting in February. You can either attend the live sessions or watch all the recordings. It's about 30 hours of information. So it's a lot of information about honeybee nutrition, varroa management, diseases, hive inspections. So we cover a lot of information, but it's a really great program to help you get started. And really our goal with the program is to tie it with you guys' field day. So, last year we had 260 beekeepers that took the 10-week course, but one thing we want to do is tie it to a field day and some of these online or these in-person events to get beekeepers that hands-on experience. So there's probably a lot of beekeepers that took this program that probably aren't part of this club already, so we'd like to connect it more with the club. The second part is the advanced level. So in the advanced level, we also have a 10-week course. We cover pesticides, we cover advanced varroa management, splitting, instrumental insemination, queen rearing. So we cover more advanced topics for the advanced level. We also have a requirement for public service hours. So I really never viewed this program as a certification program. It's more training beekeepers to be ambassadors for honeybees and pollinators. There's only so many areas I can reach in Texas, and you guys are really great ambassadors for the beekeeping community. And so part of the requirement for the advanced level is giving talks to your local clubs, going to schools, and going to other events and talking about bees and pollinators. For our master level, we currently have, I think 23 master beekeepers. We have different majors as part of the master level. So I think one thing I really love about our program is it allows you to really specialize in which area you're ever interested in. So maybe queen breeding, honey judging, native pollinators. We have specific courses for each of those majors. So it allows you to get some more in-depth information on that part of it. And then our master craftsman, we currently only have 1 master craftsman in the state in Denton County. We actually have 4 master craftsmen testing at the TBA convention. So we're kind of ramping up that program. But as part of the master craftsman level, you do a research project, so you kind of work with us. It's not like a 4-year thesis project, it's like a 1-year research project. And beekeepers really develop that project, and more importantly, we can provide that information to beekeepers across the state. So for the Master Craftsman project, 1 beekeeper is mapping drone congregation areas in Texas. Another beekeeper developed a 2-queen system, so a hive that can actually have 2 queens inside of it. Another beekeeper is feeding bananas to their colonies. So these projects can be a lot of different things, and we're going to be live streaming all these presentations on our YouTube channel at Tambo Bees. So you can either watch the live sessions on Thursday or watch the recordings afterwards. So that's really a little bit about the program. I really encourage you guys all to be part of the program. It's really great to see it grow, and hopefully we can reach more of Texas. Okay, so really the goal of this talk when Linda approached me was talking about varroa. So how many beekeepers have varroa in their colonies? And if you ever raise your hand, they're in there. You just haven't seen them yet. they're really sneaky. They like to hide. But when you talk about colony losses, and this last year has been the highest colony losses we've ever recorded. So about 62% of bees died this past year, and for the beekeepers that took the survey, it's about 1.2 million colonies. And so just for Texas, the numbers were still around 60%, and maybe 150,000 bees died this past year. And so I get this question all the time about why are bees dying? And it's really these kind of 5 Ps. And so this really started in 2005 with colony collapse order. Any beekeepers that are managing bees before 2005? I know we have one person right here, a few people. Yeah, so you guys probably remember how easy it was to keep bees alive back in the 80s and 70s. You put supers on the colonies, leave them be for a few months, and they'd be, producing a ton of honey. But now we have these major challenges and major drivers of colony losses. So number one, we have varroa mites. Varroa mites are the small parasitic mites. They've been introduced in the United States since 1987, so it's not a new problem, but it's been a problem that's been getting worse and worse and worse. And main reason for that are the pathogens. So these varroa mites, they transmit these viruses. And there's about 30 different viruses that these varroa mites transmit. Now, as a beekeeper, there's not much you can do about the viruses. We don't have a treatment for the viruses. We have no way to manage the viruses. The only way to control them is really by managing your varroa levels. And one thing about managing varroa levels is it's especially difficult here in Texas because a lot of the treatments are heat specific and you can't apply them when they're above 85 degrees. And so a lot of the education material is really developed in the Midwest, which isn't really applicable for here in Texas. Other drivers of losses, we talk about pesticides. You guys have a lot of pesticide related kills around here? Not too many?
More closer to Medina, more
Medina,
agriculture.
okay. We have queen failure and poor weather. But I'm gonna talk about kind of varroa levels. So when you ask beekeepers why their bees died, typically varroa mites and viruses are the 2 major reasons that beekeepers report to us. And that's something that I see. So this past year, I've been sampling colonies, looking through them, and I see massive signs of mite damage, signs of mites becoming resistant to amitraz, and a lot of failure related to varroa mites and the viruses that they're transmitting. But varroa is a global problem. So if you look at this map, can you guys kind of point to one area in the world that doesn't have varroa, other than Antarctica? There isn't Antarctica, but somewhere other than Antarctica. Any guesses?
Newfoundland.
Yeah, perfect. You're the first person that actually knew the answer to that.
Actually, I was gonna say
That's because I
I've
heard
been
your
there.
presentation last week.
Oh, you remember? Oh my gosh. That's cheating. That's cheating. You should have kept your mouth shut.
And actually, I was visiting my relatives in Newfoundland up in Nova Scotia, and I met with the beekeeper up there, because they're on the island.
Yeah.
And so he was asking me tons of questions, he says he hears about that, but because it's closed,
Yep.
they haven't got it yet.
And I think they have a whole plan in place,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
but yeah, and a couple years ago, Australia got varroa for the first time. And their plan was terrible. Their plan was to burn as many colonies as possible. So they started burning all these colonies, and what did that do? That upset the beekeepers. So they started transporting bees across the country. So that led to a really big issue. But yeah, Newfoundland's the only place in the world that doesn't deal with varroa mites. And so it's really not just a unique problem to Texas or the United States. It's really a global problem. So why are varroa mites really devastating? So if you haven't seen a varroa mite before, I hope you have if you do mite washes. This is what it looks like. It's about the size of a dinner plate on a bee's chest. So it feeds on the bees, it transmits viruses, but it also lowers their immune system, so it makes them prone to more bacterial infections and other diseases. So really the main reason is, they're lowering the immune system, transmitting viruses, but these varroa mites can also spread really rapidly. So if you have multiple colonies in one yard, they can spread from one colony to the next. They can spread from one colony to another yard. So these mites are really smart and that they're able to spread really quickly. So this kind of talks you through kind of the life cycle of a varroa mite. So we really have 2 major stages, and this is really important when we think about how to manage the varroa mites. these varroa mites are really smart in that they can hide inside the brood cells and hide from not only the bees, but any treatment. So we really have two major stages of the varroa mites. We have the phoretic stage, which are the mites are basically piggybacking on the back of the bees, and then we have the mites inside the brood cells. So in the phoretic stage, these are the adult foundress mites. They're feeding on the bees, they're getting nutrients ready to actually jump in the cell and actually begin to lay eggs. When that larva reaches about the 5th instar, this is when the larva is really large, and before the bees actually cap it, the mites will actually jump into the cells. And then 2 hours later, the workers cap it. And that's why I say the mites are really smart in that they're hiding from any treatment or from the bees, because the workers are really capping them and closing them inside that cell. Once the larva reaches that cocoon spinning stage, that pre-pupa stage, they start feeding on the fat body and the bloodstream of the bee to get nutrients to lay eggs. They begin laying eggs. Those will be laid one male, one female. Those siblings will mate with each other and produce future mites. And so the cycle kind of rapidly repeats over and over again. And so as your colony gets bigger, your mite levels also get bigger along with your colony. And so that's one reason that mite levels are so low in the spring, but get really high in the summer months, because as your colony gets bigger, your mite levels are also getting bigger. Now, if we're looking at these different stages of mites, what's the most important stage for mite management? Any answers? So really the phoretic stage, right? Because all the mites are exposed to a treatment. So a lot of beekeepers here probably use oxalic acid in some form. No, you don't use oxalic acid?
I don't use anything.
You don't use anything?
I break up the brood cycle once in a while.
Exactly, that's smart practice, right? Yeah, so you're saying brood breaks, which is kind of a cultural management practice where you're basically splitting the colonies in half, putting that brood break and exposing all the mites, and that's a really great management practice. But also if you're using oxalic acid, your goal is to really get all the mites in the back of the bees, so the chemical will actually kill the mites. And so really the goal with any type of mite management is really targeting these brood breaks and exposing the mites to a treatment. And this is kind of what the different mites look like. Either, these are the adult mites on the back of the bees when you see the phoretic stage. So if you do an alcohol wash or some kind of mite management, you'll see the adult stages. We see all the developing mites. So you see the males and the females, the ones that actually mate with each other. Okay, so we talk about the phoretic stage. So we think about the signs of mites. So I like to talk about kind of progressed mite damage. So as the mites get higher and the damage gets worse from the mites, you start seeing more advanced signs of mite damage. So the first thing I always do during inspection is, I always do a mite wash, obviously, but then I also see if there's any phoretic mites. So these are the mites on the back of the bees, or they're typically underneath the bees. So sometimes when I do an inspection, I'll pick up a few adult bees and look underneath them, because that's where the mites are typically hiding. And so if you start seeing mites visually, that's probably a good sign that you have pretty high mite levels inside your colony. The second sign is it's chew down brood. So has any beekeepers ever seen chew down brood before? You guys have? Yeah, so it's typically when the mite levels start getting higher, so you might start seeing phoretic stage, but as that season progresses, you might start seeing this chew down brood. So this is what it looks like. So this is an adult pupa, and this is a pupa with its head chewed off. So when the mites are inside the cell, one way that bees are defending themselves from the mites is by physically cannibalizing and chewing down on the bees. And so if you start seeing chew down brood, even 5 to 10 cells, that's probably a good sign that you have higher mite levels inside your colony. And one thing you'll also see is a lot of mite frass or mite poop inside the cell, and even when you take them out with the tweezers, you might see some mites inside the cells. The next sign is parasitic mite syndrome. Has any beekeepers ever seen parasitic mite syndrome? Yeah, this is the most advanced sign of mite damage, and this is a sign that I typically see when there's a point of no return. When mite levels get so high that they start transmitting viruses, it can lead to the larva actually sinking down inside the cells. And you actually see a few mites on the back of the bees. And so this is a parasitic mite syndrome. I would say about 95% of the time, there's no coming back from this type of damage. It's really hard for the bee to really recover from this. And this is when we started seeing colony collapse disorder, where the bees would just disappear. And it mainly be due to this parasitic mite syndrome, where this virus would rapidly disperse, throughout the colony, and then the bees would just disappear because they're dying so rapidly. Another sign is deformed wing virus. So this is the most common virus associated with varroa mites. Now, right now we have 3 different variants of this virus, and what it does is it actually cripples the wing and causes deformities in the wing. You'll also see grayish color and deformities on the bees, and they'll also start becoming hairless. Now, this virus is actually changing a lot. It's evolving really rapidly just due to the amount of varroa in the colonies in Texas. And so now you might not see the crippled wings anymore, but they still might have that deformed wing virus. And this might be one of the reasons that we're seeing these high colony losses, is because this virus is rapidly evolving to a more virulent form. Another sign is this kind of mite poop or mite frass. So sometimes when beekeepers, their colonies die, they send me pictures. They'll send me a frame, and if I look at that frame, I'll see a bunch of mite poop all over it. And they'll say, well, wax moth killed my colonies, or small hive beetle killed my colonies. But the minute I see that frame with a bunch of mite frass on it, I knew it was mites at some point. They start monitoring for the mite levels. And what you see is a lot of these white specks. And so if you have colonies with high varroa levels, and they start crashing and dying, you'll see a bunch of these white specks all over the frames. And in this case, this one had a bunch of nymphs, so young developing mites inside those cells. So this colony actually died from that parasitic mite syndrome. One thing that's also very common with mite damage is kind of co-infections. So one really common co-infection is European foul brood. So has any beekeepers ever seen European foul brood, at least a little bit? Yeah, so European foul brood is a bacterial infection. And actually, even if I tested a really healthy colony, all bees have some form of European foul brood. They're just not expressing it in this kind of discolored, kind of crumpled up, viewpoint like this. And so what happens is the larvae become kind of yellowish color. They start becoming not clear C-shape, kind of curling inside the cell. And they actually might start scaling at the bottom of the cell. Now, the only way to actually treat for this is by getting an antibiotic prescription from a veterinarian. But in most cases, what's happening when you see European foul brood is your mite levels are so out of control that their immune system is lower, and you start seeing this European foul brood along with the varroa damage. And so the best thing to really do is to treat the root of the problem. So you could buy antibiotics and treat European foul brood, but if you're not managing the varroa levels, it's not going to do you any good. Okay, so when you talk about varroa management, there's really 3 major stages. So number 1 is really understanding the life cycle. And this includes understanding when the varroa levels grow in your colonies, but also how that coincides with your colony size. So like I mentioned earlier, as your colony gets bigger, your varroa levels get bigger alongside of that. So it's really important to know the life cycle of the varroa mites and how they coincide with your colony size. Number 2 is to monitor the varroa levels. So understanding how high your varroa levels are, understanding the threshold, and understanding when to actually treat your colonies. And then finally, understanding what treatments will work in your area during certain times of the year. And so you could be monitoring, but if you're using the wrong treatment, like formic acid, for example, when it's 95 degrees outside, that's gonna kill and scorch your entire colony. So it's really important to know your treatment options and understand when and when not to use them. So this is a graphic from the Honeybee Health Coalition. It's a coalition of researchers, beekeepers, industry leaders, and we developed this varroa management guide, so I recommend going online and downloading that PDF. But this kind of walks you through kind of the life cycle of a varroa mite in relation to a colony. So this yellow is the varroa levels, and the blue is your colony. So typically in the spring, your colonies are very small, but as the season progresses, your colonies get bigger and bigger and bigger until around probably July and August. After that, your colonies get smaller and prepare for the winter. So you see this kind of normal growth curve over time. But here's the varroa levels. As your colony gets bigger and bigger and bigger, your varroa levels get bigger also, especially if you're not treating at all. But what happens is, as your colony starts getting smaller, the varroa levels surpass your colony size, and that leads to parasitic mite syndrome and some of this really bad damage. Now the problem is, if you're not managing this growth curve and not knocking down your mite levels, then you can get in the middle of July and August and say, oh shoot, my mite levels are 10 mites out of 100 bees, I need to treat. But in the middle of July and August, especially here in Texas, you really don't have any treatment options. Formic acid is not gonna work, Vimol is not gonna work, oxalic acid, there's so much brood in your colony, it's not gonna work as effectively. And so waiting till the varroa levels get too high, it's almost too late at that point. And so what you wanna do is really knock down the mite levels early in the season. So be proactive instead of reactive. So knock down the mite levels so they don't grow as fast as the colony. So what I typically do for our colonies, we have about 150 colonies in Overton as part of our breeding program. And so I monitor our mite levels once a month. I start in March and do it all the way until probably November. And so how often do you guys monitor your mites?
Oh, I try twice a year.
Twice a year. So it's really at least 4 times a year
I
if
know.
possible. At least 4 times a year. And I understand it can be really hard to get new colonies, dig new colonies, but every time you do an inspection, especially if you have the mite kit already set up, it's really fast and easy to monitor your mite levels. And the threshold we typically use is 3 mites per 100 bees. And so if our mite levels are above 3 mites per 100 bees, then we'll apply treatment and manage them that way. So these are 3 different ways to monitor your mite levels. Do most people use alcohol wash? Most people do? Okay. So there's really 3 major options. I'm not sure if the CO2 option is available anymore. I've tried it, it's not very accurate. But a lot of beekeepers either use a powdered sugar roll or an alcohol wash. Now, one thing I will say is a lot of beekeepers rely on the powdered sugar roll because they don't want to kill the bees every time they do a mite monitoring. But just know that the powdered sugar roll isn't going to be as accurate. So the accuracy is maybe 70%. And when you're relying on the threshold, it's important to be as accurate as possible. Whereas the alcohol wash, you catch about 99% of the mites, so you know exactly how many mites are actually in your colony. So I do recommend using the alcohol wash if possible, but regardless if you're doing any type of monitoring, that's really important. It's really important to know your mite levels. And this is an easy mite check you can buy at any bee supply store. It has a filter. You just kind of pour alcohol into it, or you use, I use windshield wiper fluid. That works really well. Soapy water works very well. There's different things you can use other than alcohol. And what it does is it separates the mites from the bees. And as you can see, this is one of our colonies. You can see the mite levels are just out of control, like 10 mites per 100 bees. And so this one is definitely thrown out of our breeding program because it can't manage the mite levels. And one thing I tell a lot of beekeepers is, when you monitor mites, I know it sucks to see the bees drown inside the alcohol and die, within a few seconds. But these bees are being replaced every couple hours. Bees are queens laying 2,000 eggs per day, and I kind of view this as more of a biopsy. It's better to lose or sacrifice 300 bees rather than all 30,000 or 40,000 bees. And it really doesn't hurt the colony at all. And so here's a video. I'm going to show you the video, but it's on the Honeybee Health Coalition. So if you've never done an alcohol wash before or have no idea how to do an alcohol wash, they have a 7-minute video walking through how to do an alcohol wash or powdered sugar roll, and it's a really great video on the Honeybee Health Coalition. Okay, so when you think about IPM. So IPM stands for Integrated Pest Management. That's the fancy way of saying what strategies are we going to use to manage the varroa mites. And so I always like to talk about it in relation to like a pyramid. So the bigger part of the pyramid are things that we should focus on with varroa mites, whereas the smallest parts of the pyramid are things we should focus less on. But really, it really takes everything all together to actually effectively manage varroa levels. So the biggest part of the pyramid is resistant stocks. So if possible, and if you do have a breeding program, try to breed bees that are resistant to the varroa mites. And I'll talk about that in relation to our breeding program. We're breeding bees that are resistant to varroa mites with 2 different traits. And I know it's really hard to find resistant stocks, but it's possible to try to do so. But even if you're buying a stock from a beekeeper that claims you're resistant or not, I would still monitor them regardless, because you never know if they're truly resistant or not. Because their stocks may be resistant, but they're open mating with 12 to 20 random drones, you can lose those traits really quickly. The second one is mechanical, and so you mentioned those brood breaks, so splitting your colonies. That's one way that we manage our varroa levels in Overton is by splitting our colonies when their mite levels are really high. One other option is caging the queen to get the brood breaks. Another option is drone brood removal. So there's definitely non-chemical ways you can manage the varroa levels. And then we have the chemical options. So we have soft chemicals. So these are your organic chemicals like formic acid, thymol, oxalic acid. And we have our hard chemicals, our synthetic treatments like apivar and I guess fluvalinate is an option. So these are 2 traits that bees have. So you think about a honeybee colony, there's about 40 to 60,000 bees within the colony. And as you can imagine, they're all kind of stuck in that one small box. And that leads to a lot of risk for diseases to spread within the colony. But one way that bees defend themselves is through what we call social immunity. So these social behaviors that bees have to defend themselves from diseases and parasites. And these are two social behaviors that the bees have that they can use to defend themselves from the mites. So number one is mite biting. I've heard mite hunting. This is a trait where it's sort of a grooming trait, where the bees can actually find the mites, chew their legs off, and kill them that way. And this is from our, so I did my PhD at Purdue University, and we were breeding for Purdue mite biting behavior. And what we would do is we put a sticky board on the bottom of the colony, pick up all the mites, and measure what percentage of mites have their legs chewed off or not. And over time, we were able to breed for this mite biting trait. And this breeding program, they haven't treated for over 20 years, mainly because the bees are able to defend themselves. And you can see from this picture, you can see all the legs chewed off, so the bees are actually finding the mites and chewing the legs off. Another trait is VSH, varroa sensitive hygienic behavior. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about VSH before. If not, I'll kind of walk you through it. So bees have these different forms of hygienic behavior. And with VSH, when the mite's actually feeding on the larva give up a different scent or pheromone. And so bees that are bred for VSH, they can actually smell the mites inside the cells. So what happens is they actually uncap the cells and then basically sterilize the mites and basically stop them from reproducing altogether. And so these are really two traits that bees have that you can breed for and has resistance to varroa mites. Another form is mechanical control. Does anybody do any drone brood removal? It's very time consuming.
No.
But if you go to a bee supply store, you can buy the drone frames. These are frames with larger cells. So when the queen lays an egg on those frames, they lay the males. Now the males, the drones, they develop for 24 days, they're larger, and so the mites love them. They're basically mite magnets. So what happens is you can put that frame into your colony, the mites will jump into the cells, and right when they're capped, you can remove those frames and throw into a freezer and kill all the mites that way. And so this is a really effective way. But you need to make sure that you're on top of it, because if you leave that frame in there and the mites emerge and the drones emerge, it'll just cause more mite damage in your colony. So one thing I see with a lot of beekeepers is they forget about it, and then their mite levels even get worse and worse and worse. But yeah, another option is caging your queen. So you can cage your queen to get a brood break, and what that means is you can cause that brood break, expose all the mites, and disrupt the reproduction that way. So those are non-chemical options.
When's the ideal time to cage a queen like that?
I would say probably in May or June. It's probably a good time. Right when your colony starts getting bigger and you have a lot of brood in your colonies. I wouldn't do it when your colonies are practically broodless. But if you're in the middle of summertime and your mite levels are really high, that's a really great time to also do it.
How long would you cage her?
About 3 weeks.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, you sort of want that whole cycle, that whole brood cycle. So, and you can buy different cages. You can make your own cage out of number 3 mesh. You can buy some stuff off of a store. So the queen can still lay a little bit, but in one isolated area. And you can move that cage around the colony. So these are soft chemical options. So for the beekeepers that do treat, what chemicals do you guys use for managing varroa mites, if any?
Oxalic acid.
Oxalic acid?
Thymol.
Okay, you guys use thymol? When do you typically use thymol?
Not in summer.
Not in summer, no.
Usually in the spring, early
Okay.
spring.
I will say about thymol, on the label it says you can use it when it's 105 degrees. I would never use it when it's above 90 degrees. So even though the label may say that you should be using it, just use any of these treatments with caution. So number 1 is oxalic acid. It's just a wood bleach. You can buy it at a bee supply store, or you can go to any type of store and buy wood bleach, and that works just as well. With oxalic acid, you can apply it in 3 different ways. So one is a drizzle. So you can mix it with sugar water and then kind of drizzle it over your colony. Number 2 is a vaporizer. So you can heat it up, fumigate the colony with the oxalic acid. And then they have the new Roxanne strips. So a strip of oxalic acid that works for 42 to 56 days. Now one thing with oxalic acid, just know that it doesn't work when there's brood inside your colony. So it's a contact treatment. So what that means is when you're applying it, it's only killing the mites that are on the back of the bees, the phoretic mites. It's not killing the mites inside the brood cells. So if you're using a drizzle over a vaporizer, you can't apply it once and expect it to work. You might apply it, every 3 to 4 days for about 3 to 4 weeks. And that's one thing that's really great about the Varroxan strips is it works for about 42 to 56 days. And the reason for that prolonged treatment is as those mites are emerging from the cells, it's gonna slowly kill them over time.
We have, if they wanna see afterwards, we have the strips here, if anybody wants to see what they look like, cause I know they're more newer to
Yeah.
some people, but we have some of them.
Yes.
How does it actually kill the mites?
The Varroxan?
Whatever treatment you use, how does it actually kill?
It does kill the mites, yeah. So the oxalic acid is a contact treatment, whereas thymol and formic acid are more fumigant treatments.
Does it give them asthma or what, how is it killing the mites?
That's a good question. I think for oxalic acid, it gets on like their tarses, and so they're unable to move and it kills them that way. But I'm not sure exactly how it kills the mites. That's a good question.
Okay, enough.
How often do you test your wax in your hives for contamination from these?
I don't test my wax samples because one is very expensive. But yeah, that's a really good point because some of these treatments you should be using with honey supers on. And so, like thymol, for example, I think formic acid, I'm not sure. Yeah, I think you can legally use it with honey supers on. But thymol, especially if you have honey supers on, it will contaminate your honey and cause some issues. Yep. Yeah, so with oxalic acid, it's a contact treatment. And so, oxalic acid works really well when your colonies are broodless. And so if you have colonies right now, they're probably practically broodless at this point. Maybe you have a half frame of brood or maybe a full frame of brood. This is a perfect time to do a drizzle or fumigation. I would also do an oxalic acid probably in the spring, probably in February, right before your queen starts laying eggs and they start, brooding up. That's really the perfect time to use oxalic acid. Thymol is sort of a mixed bag. It depends on the temperature. So like I said, it says 105 degrees is the temperature threshold, but I wouldn't use it when it's above, 90 degrees. And so this is probably a pretty good spring treatment. I assume that's when you use it, probably in the spring, probably around April, I'd imagine. Yeah, so April's a really good time. Formic acid, formic acid is sort of a mixed bag, but just know if you're using formic acid, that's a really harsh treatment, especially the temperatures are really high. So I always add an extra box, or I split my boxes up just to give them some more ventilation, because it will kill your queens. And then we have hard chemicals, so Apivar. Does any beekeepers use Apivar? You guys do? So Apivar, the active ingredient is amitraz, and so a lot of beekeepers rely on amitraz or Apivar for their treatment. Now the problem with Apivar now is we're seeing resistance to the treatment from the mites. And so it's worked for a very long time, but just know that this treatment may not work as well as you would think it does. And just remember that, you may have never used a synthetic chemical like this beforehand, but if you're buying bees from another beekeeper, you're also buying their mites. And so if you're gonna use amitraz or Apivar, just make sure to monitor your mites and make sure it works properly or not.
I saw an article that says that was the main reason that there was an increase in colony deaths was because they had become resistant to it.
Yeah, and so, for the commercial beekeepers, right, the ones that are managing a lot of colonies, it's sort of a cheap option for them, so they've been overusing amitraz for a very long time. I'm actually surprised mites haven't become resistant to it earlier, and so they've been using it since 2005. Before that, mites became resistant to fluvalinate and comifos, and now we encounter the amitraz both. And with commercial beekeepers, well, they're basically applying it illegally, so they buy the mixture and make it themselves. So they're overusing it, or they're not using it per label, and that leads to more risk for resistance.
Does that mean you should be rotating your treatment?
Always be rotating.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and even with beekeepers, right? They buy the chemical, they mix it maybe 1 to 10. Some beekeepers do 1 to 1. I even saw last year beekeepers just pouring it directly on the colony. And so it's just, if you don't know how to use it, then that leads to more risk for amitraz resistance. So really developing an IPM plan is really important. So if possible, try to get resistant stocks, which I'll talk about as part of our breeding program. Try to utilize these mechanical controls like drone brood removal, but more importantly, even splitting your colonies often if the mite levels are really high, or caging the queen. These are really great options if you tie those into oxalic acid. And then, utilizing some of these soft chemicals, but understanding when to use them and how to use them. So this is a really good guide by the Honeybee Health Coalition. They have videos for how to apply every single treatment. They have videos on how to do an alcohol wash. And this whole manual is about a 40-page manual about every single treatment, which ones you can use with the honey super, which ones you can't, what are the temperature restrictions. Those are really great guide. But just know that this is developed for all beekeepers in the United States. And so beekeeping in Texas is a lot different than keeping bees in California or Pennsylvania or New York, for example. So let's keep that in mind when you're kind of developing an IPM plan. Okay, so what is the solution to varroa? So to me, I think the biggest solution to varroa is breeding and genetics. So like I mentioned, we have traits. Bees do have natural resistance to varroa, and if we can breed for that, that is the biggest solution to the varroa mites. So in Overton, we have about 150 colonies as part of our breeding program, and we're breeding for really these 5 major types of traits. We're breeding for honey production, we're breeding for bees that are more aggressive.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
That's it. I was just waiting. Yeah.
Well, we want to make sure people are serious about beekeeping. we're breeding for bees that are less aggressive. We're breeding for mite resistance by mite biting and VSH. We're breeding for viral tolerance, which I'll talk about, and then survival. So when we think about mite resistance, right, we're trying to target mites from 2 different directions. So, you know, the Purdue breeding program, they bred for just mite biting. In the Baton Rouge Bee Lab, they bred for just, you know, VSH. We're actually breeding for those 2 traits at one time. Because one thing with even VSH, sometimes those mites can be pushed back, and then they can jump back into the cell later on. And so our goal with the mite biting is, if those mites do get pushed back, the bees will find them and kill them that way. So we're really targeting mites from 2 different directions. So the VSH, like I mentioned, when the mites are feeding on that larva, they give them a certain scent. And so bees that are bred for that trait, they can actually smell the mites with their antenna, they uncap it, and that disrupts your reproduction and it basically sterilizes the mites. The second one is the mite biting behavior, where the bees find the mites and chew their legs out and kill them that way. What's kind of cool about the mite biting is, if you have a colony that's, you know, not bred for mite biting behavior, it's almost like the mites will be in the back of the bees, but the bees don't notice them at all. But they're bred for the mite biting, they get very agitated. You put a mite on the back of their back, they just get really agitated, start kind of shaking around, trying to get the mite out. So they're also sensitive to the mites. And so, I do want to go back on how we historically bred for these traits. So for VSH, and it's a really time-consuming and hard trait to breed for, is we need to open up 100 cells, and we need to measure how many mites are actually inside the cells. So it takes a long time, especially if you're doing hundreds. For the mite biting, like I said, we put a sticky board in the bottom of the colony, and we get undergrads to pick up all the mites and measure what percentage are, which percentage have their legs chewed off or not. But it's very time-consuming. We need to do it, you know, once a month, you know, throughout an entire year.
That VHH, you don't always get what you want.
Not all the time, no. And one thing with VSH is you lose this trait really quickly. And so if you buy, you know, VSH from a breeder that's actually doing instrumental insemination, and you open-mate that queen, you lose 50% of the genetics every single generation. So a lot of beekeepers market their stocks as VSH. Well, maybe they got VSH like 10 years ago, but they no longer have VSH. So that's why I say, even if beekeepers marketing their stocks as being resistant, make sure to monitor and verify that. Because if you guys are open mating queens here in Kerrville, who knows what drones are out there? So, you know, you can lose the genetics really quickly. Yeah, and it might be spicier here too. So like I said, it's really hard to breed for these traits. And so one thing we're trying to do is develop faster and easier ways to breed for these, not only for our breeding program, but for any beekeepers interested in breeding. And so I was going to talk about the history of breeding. So every single industry goes through these major steps in breeding, from 1.0, 2.0 to 3.0. Currently the bee industry is still in 1.0, whereas all these other industries are in 3.0. And this 3.0 allows, you know, breeders to get rapid gains and breed for these traits more effectively and even faster. Now, incidental breeding, which is 1.0, this is sort of subjective breeding. What a lot of beekeepers do is they say, these colonies produce the most honey, so we should breed and select from those colonies. Well, how do you know that those colonies are actually the best colonies to breed from, right? It's very subjective in that way. Number 2 is statistical breeding. So you use statistics to help make your breeding decisions. As we go back to the honey production trait, you could have 2 yards, maybe 4 colonies per yard. And maybe you choose that one colony in that one yard that produces a lot of honey. Well, if you take that colony and move it to the other yard, how do you know that the colony is gonna do better than the other colonies, right? Because you have a lot of biases in place based on where the colonies are located, based on your management practices. And so statistics can help us determine which one's actually the best breeders. And then finally, genomic breeding. So genomic is basically genetics. And so our goal is to do genetic tests on the colonies and really figure out which ones actually have the traits or not. And so we do know some markers for VSH and mite biting. And so a beekeeper could sequence their colonies and we could tell them which ones actually have that trait or not. And that's the fastest, cheapest way to actually breed for these traits. And so really our goal of our lab is to get the bee industry from 1.0 all the way to 3.0. And so really what's the benefit of genomic breeding? I think for our breeding program is really a shortened breeding cycle. So if we use honey production, for example, it takes 1 full year to measure honey production. And so that really is just 1 full breeding cycle to actually choose which ones produce the most honey. But with genomic breeding, you can sequence a colony and have potentially 4 breeding cycles per year. So what that means is you get the same progress in 1 year versus 4 years. So this would be a really valuable tool to breed for traits faster and more efficiently. 2 is for difficult to measure traits. So like VSH, which is very time consuming, mite biting is very time consuming. Genetic tests can be a really fast way to breed for these traits. And then finally, it's cheaper and less time consuming. So as we get into the cost for our genetic tests, it'll be about $15 per sample. So if you account for labor costs and other costs associated with measuring these traits, it's gonna be a really fast and cheap way to measure them. So this is kind of an example that I did a few years back to look at, can we use genetic testing to replace the way we've been selecting for traits in the past? So at the top right here, this is known as Minnesota hygienic behavior. It was developed at the University of Minnesota. And this isn't for varroa resistance, it's more for disease resistance. And this is one reason that we don't see chalk brood or sac brood or European foul brood much anymore, because the bees are bred for this trait. So what we do is, we get a 3-inch PVC pipe, we pour liquid nitrogen on the frame, and that kills 300 brood cells on that frame. We put it back into the colony for 24 hours, and we take it out and measure what percentage of dead bees are removed or not. Now, if all of them are removed, those colonies are really hygienic and able to remove any dead bees or infected bees inside the colony. Now, this colony isn't very hygienic. You see after 24 hours, so there's still a lot of brood cells inside there. So our thought process was, well, can we replace this way of measuring the trait with a genetic test? And so there's about 126 mutations associated with this hygienic behavior. So I'm gonna walk you through this graph right here. This is a hygienic score. So we're looking for around 95 to 100%. So what that means is after 24 hours, about 95 to 100% of those dead bees were actually removed. So F1 stands for 1 generation, F3 stands for 3 generations. So the baseline, this is an unselected stock. So it makes sense that there wasn't any changes in hygienic behavior. FAS stands for the field assisted test, or our actual freeze test. As you can see, first generation, the scores are around 60% and increased to around 95%. But when we use a genetic test, we saw the exact same results, where we were able to use a genetic test, sequence those colonies, and breed for this hygienic behavior after 3 generations. So this really showcases that this can replace a lot of our breeding and selection and make it a lot easier for beekeepers like myself or other beekeepers in Texas or the US. So this is a genetic test that we'll be launching pretty soon. So like I mentioned earlier, we're launching a honeybee diagnostic lab. So we have a sequencer at our lab and we're offering this genetic test. I think we call it the 16-and-B test, because honeybees have 16 chromosomes, but it's been very similar to a 23andMe test, right? So if you were taking a 23andMe test before, it can tell you whether you're supposed to have blue eyes, certain diseases, things along those lines. This genetic test will tell you the exact same thing. So this example of what it looks like, so it'll tell you basically how Africanized are your bees. The red is Africanized, so it can tell you, are your bees 12% Africanized, are they 100%? It'll also tell you admixture score, which is basically a mutt score, so how much of a mutt are your bees? It'll give you a genetic diversity score, so genetic diversity high or low in your colonies. But then it gives you breeding values for each of these different traits. So breeding value means that the higher the breeding value, the more likely those colonies are to have the traits. So are the colonies more likely to be tolerant to viruses? Are they more likely to produce more honey? Are they likely to grow faster? It'll give you all those different traits. And then we combine it into a single queen score. So from a breeder's perspective, you can weight these values on whatever you want. So maybe you're more interested in varroa resistance, or maybe you're more interested in honey production. So based on what you're interested in, we change this queen score based on your breeding decisions. But even from a consumer, right, if you're buying a queen or you're buying a nucleus colony, you want to make sure that they're actually marketed fairly or marketed accurately. So this could be a really great tool for a consumer if you're buying queens or nucleus colonies or singles from our beekeepers to verify what your bees actually are. So it's become the whole pipeline for a beekeeper. So we have kits that we send out to the beekeeper. You collect about 10 workers per colony. You send it to a lab for genetic testing, and we output the genetic test and the queen score. So plus 20 would be a really great queen, really great colony. A 0 is an average, and negative 20 is really bad.
And we tell you what we want to know about the bees.
Exactly. So for the breeder, right, it depends on what they want to breed for. So maybe some breeders want to breed more for honey production. So you rank on the scale from 0 to 100. So maybe you're 40% interested in honey production, 20% in virus resistance, and so on. So we can change that value based on what you're looking for.
So all my bees are hot.
All of them are hot?
They're the best.
Yep.
That's what I've learned is the hot ones are less trouble.
Yeah, and one thing with our breeding program, and that's something we find with breeding for these traits, is when you breed for more hygienic bees that are able to deal with mites, they become more aggressive. These traits are connected to each other, so it's really hard to separate those.
Do you have any of this stuff with you?
With me? Which
These
part?
test cards or anything?
I don't. Yeah, right now we're hiring a technician for the diagnostic lab, so we're hoping to have this ready. I mean, the genetic test is ready, but I need to get the lab up and running. So hopefully by, April of next year. Okay, with that, here is our link to our master beekeeping program. So if you want more information, go to that webpage. But also on the right side, we have a listserv. So we send email updates about our program, the fact sheets we're developing, anything along those lines. So please sign up for that listserv. Here's my personal email, so send me an email if you have any questions. Here is our YouTube channel at Tamu Bees. So we have quite a few videos on there. We actually did a webinar on the new varroa treatment, and so that's all live and recorded on our YouTube channel. But also for all of our master craftsman sessions on Thursday, those will be on the YouTube channel. And then here is our Facebook page. So hopefully you guys all know how to use QR codes for now, but if you go to Texas A&M Agriculture Program, the phone guide. Yeah, it might not work for you then. Okay, with that,
Familiar with polyandry?
polyandry, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so polyandry means that they're mating with 12 to 20 males. Yep.
There's a lot more to in that than that.
With DCEs, yeah.
You familiar with Georgia University?
Keep
The guy out
Delpling.
there? Forget his name.
Yeah, keep Delpling.
Yeah, that's it.
Yep. Yeah, he just retired, and Jamie Ellis is taking over for his position.
Yeah, I was trying to twist our president's arm to get him to come talk to us.
I did talk to Jamie Ellis, but he's in the middle of moving to Georgia during our field day, and his wife wants to buy the house, and he's listening to his wife, which is the wise decision, so. He said he signed us up for the following year, so I did talk to him.
Oh, good.
He's very nice, he's very pleasant.
Yep. Well, now I'll take any questions.
So, A&M, over the years, they've produced like hot resistant, rapid freeze, or like heat resistant tomato plants. Is the direction with this program to basically get a Texas line of bees? Or more national?
That's sort of our plan, exactly, a Texas specific line. And we're currently breeding on that, so we started this past year. The biggest issue is how to get those in the hands of beekeepers. That's really the hardest part. And so, the problem is, beekeepers are placing queens every single year. The queen's mating, in the air, so we can't put the queen and the drones in the pen and have it mate with each other. And so we're trying to figure out ways to get these into the hands of beekeepers, because you almost have to give them breeder queens every single year, so they can still have those traits. So we can give a breeder queen 1 year, but because those genetics get lost so quickly, it almost has to be every year or every couple of years.
That's a bad system, change your queens every year, but I'm sorry, it's like so. And our bee season is changing, it's getting longer, because we're getting warmer in the winter time. I mean, my queens are pumping out brood like it's the middle of summer right now. Of course, I'm feeding Ultra Bee and 5-gallon buckets of sugar syrup about every day, so.
Yeah, I mean, with your queen every single year, it's tough. You know, if you're a commercial beekeeper and you have all these queen failures after 6 months to a year, you almost have to replace
That's
the
the
queen. But then
commercial
it's also
guys.
bad, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not selecting for better queens.
Yeah,
You're
the
like-
commercial guys are in it for the money and pump out the money and stuff, it's like, I don't necessarily.
Well, it's really tough on the bees, right? Because you're shipping them across the country, they're never really going broodless. They're always going from, you know, Texas to Dakotas to California, so it's really tough on the bees.
A lot of states, the commercial guys have to have their bees inspected every year to be able to sell, or sell out of state.
In
like that.
Texas, you have to.
In Texas, the guys that are selling bees supposed to have the certification.
If you're crossing borders, you have to, I believe, yeah. But in Florida, you have to get a health report, and they actually do test for Africanization. So if your bees are Africanized, you can't, you know, sell the queens from that line.
Right.
But yeah, I think probably Texas and Florida are the only states. I know California is a little bit of testing.
Georgia has to have certification every year, the guys that sell out of state.
I'm not sure about Georgia. That's a good
I
question.
talked about Benny in Georgia, and he has to be certified.
Does he?
every year.
Okay.
Okay, he's gonna be around, Garrett's gonna be here if you have any other questions and you wanna talk to him. We're gonna move forward on with our raffle, and it's a small group today, so we have a high chance of doing the raffles, but there's two things that I wanted to tell you. Everything up here, minus the extension cord, that belongs to the college, is up for grabs. The only thing is, we do have this cute little, I actually have mine in my bee yard.
We don't.
This is in the raffle, but it's not in the raffle. Make an offer, and whatever your donation is.